Hi, welcome once again to the channel Blossoming Daisy. My name is Mangali Somtamba. This channel is for the young lady who wants to pursue the kingdom of God. Welcome once again. Today I want us to take a short left. All I have for you today is just a word of encouragement. Um, I think we often suffer in silence. This is coming from feedback I've received from the video I did 3 weeks ago, which was Masquerade, where a lot of people were like, you know what, we are suffering in silence, and I feel like I'm the only one going through stuff, because we create this facade that if I'm Christian, that means I don't go through stuff. If I'm Christian, that means I have it all together. If I'm Christian, I've just reached that point. And when I am going through stuff, it means that God doesn't love me. Like, I don't feel his presence. Like, I don't know what is happening. If I am going through stuff, it means I have sinned. I've just fallen off the wagon. Um, Stuff is just wrong. And to understand that the church is supposed to be this haven for all of us, where we know that it's a place that we can run to, it's a place where we can get protection, it's a place where we can hide from the enemy, like run, um, and be held with love, and we get deliverance. And yeah, but somehow a lot of stuff is happening in the church, and we are there, even though some of us haven't been delivered. We don't feel the Spirit of the Lord, like literally protecting and guiding us and leading us. I remember a few months ago, in our yard, we were cutting off some trees, trimming some trees, and then we pulled the branches and we kind of stubbed them in one of the corners. 2 days later, I went outside. I was hanging some clothes, and I noted as I watched the leaves, they were still green, and I was kind of surprised. So when I was done, I walked past this thing, and the spirit was like, "This is what is happening to my church. A lot of the people in the church are so disconnected, but because they look green, we don't even pay attention. We think everyone is okay. We think everyone is fine, whereas this person is dying inside." Because if this wasn't the case, we wouldn't have cases of depression. People wouldn't commit suicide in the church. We wouldn't have anxiety issues in the church. There are a lot of things in the church, and because we have this facade that we need to be holy, because we love God, we need to be there all the time, we need to be happy all the time. When we are going through stuff, we can't say anything to anyone, because that means we're not holy anymore. Like, all of us need to have our stuff on fleek, and we hardly have someone we can talk to because we fear judgment. You are holy. You think, you look at me and you're like, she's so holy. Like, if you only knew, it is literally just God carrying me through, like pushing me through. It's God's grace. So you fear judgment, even if you feel like you're drowning, you feel like you've been cut off the supply of God or God's grace. You fear judgment, so you suffer in silence. Number two, you feel like, I'm gonna share your business. Like, these are things that, yeah, happen, because I know I've stopped. In some cases, I was going through stuff and I said nothing to anyone because I kind of felt like, I gonna share my business. Like, I don't want my business all over. Like, you know how church folk can be. Like, can you please pray for someone? This is how church women gossip. Can you please pray for so and so? They're going through something. Gossip is always in a prayer item. So you fear that someone will share our business. And then thirdly, the enemy tells us this lie that you you are the only one going through this. You are going through this because you've sinned, you deserve punishment, and God doesn't love you. It's amazing how many of us are in the church and actually just feel like we are so far from God. Like the love of God, which is the foundational thing of Christianity. The core of it all is love. But how many of us actually do feel the love in church? So the enemy is able to tell us this lie that no one loves you, God doesn't love you, He's punishing you, you are going through stuff because He's punishing you. And you going through this is literally something that's just unique to you. No one has ever gone through it. So suffer in isolation because no one can help you in this. And that's a big fat lie from the enemy. If all of us were to sit in a circle and share, this is what I've gone through, this is what I've gone through, these are the insecurities I have to come through, this is what I suffered from, this is what happened in my life, all of us would be surprised that, oh my gosh, I'm really not the only one going through this. Like, so much of us are going through stuff. I don't know how many times I can say that. Like, so many of us are going through stuff. What you are going through is not something that's just unique to you. And the fact that you know and you love God doesn't mean that you're not going to go through stuff. So that's also a lie, that if we go through stuff, it's because God is punishing us and not whatnot. Yes, there are things that we go through because there are consequences of actions that we took. But you don't just, God is love. He's not just going to throw stuff at us. The enemy throws stuff at us. He, as God, is constantly trying to show us love. He's trying to pull us closer to Him all the time. So these are lies of the enemy. And one of the things that will help us get out of this rut is to actually be able to speak like, someone help me. I am going through something. And only when you speak can you realize that, you know what, I'm not the only one going through this. I'm not the only one suffering depression and going to church and saying hallelujah. We worship and we praise Him even through the midst of our issues, because He promised that through it all He will hold our hand, and that is what He will do. He sustains us through it all. So today I just want us to look at the guy who made a mistake, but God rescued him anyway. So it is King Hezekiah. King Hezekiah is a guy who came into power in 2 Kings chapter 18. He comes into power and he is the king of Judah. At this time, the Israelites had their own kingdom and Judah had their own kingdom. Originally, it was 12 tribes. Then they kind of split. So it was 2 tribes, Judah and Benjamin. They became Judah, the nation. Then the other 10 tribes remained with the name Israel. Okay, so now Hezekiah becomes king of Judah. Israelites are exiled and destroyed because of the sin. The kings that came through Israel were just all bad, and God was kind of like, even though He warned them many times, God was kind of like, okay, go into exile, my people. Okay, so here we find the king, Hezekiah. He takes over this kingdom and he takes over this nation. And when you read what he did, he's like this guy who, it's the surviving kingdom. He is this guy who was just totally devoted to God. And he breaks down the altars where they worshipped idols, and he focused on God. He worshipped God wholeheartedly. And I think all of us, when we come to God, we always take that decision, I am going to worship God wholeheartedly. Not realizing that the enemy is just sitting there and waiting for us. I'm like, I am coming. I'm going to show her flames. So the king of Judah is like loving the Lord. At this time, the nation of Judah was supposed to be paying an annual fee to the king of Assyria, who's called Sennacherib. Assyria was a nation that was kind of brutal. They did whatever they wanted to do. Like, anytime, anywhere, they just killed people for sport. They would just wake up in the morning, what are we doing today? I'm like, oh, let's kill some people, So they would just do anything whenever they wanted. They were just brutal and ruthless, okay? So Hezekiah rebelled. He's not paying this annual fee. Now, this king of Assyria comes through to Hezekiah and is like, chapter 18 and chapter 19 tells the whole story. He's like, come through with my money. And Hezekiah is like, okay, please withdraw from me. Don't attack me. I will come through with your money. what Hezekiah does then is something quite interesting. In verses 14 and 15 of chapter 18, he says, So Hezekiah, king of Judah, sent this message to the king of Assyria at Lachish. I don't know, Lachish. I have done wrong. Withdraw from me, and I will pay whatever you demand of me. The king of Assyria exacted from Hezekiah, king of Judah, 300 talents of silver and 30 talents of gold. So Hezekiah gave him all the silver that was found in the temple of the Lord and in the treasuries of the royal palace. At this time, Hezekiah, king of Judah, stripped off the gold with which he had covered the doors and doorposts of the temple of the Lord and gave it to the king of Assyria. Literally, he goes and he strips the temple. Here is Hezekiah. He went through and he worshipped God with all his heart and all his might. Then this king comes through. And Hezekiah, for a minute, he kind of doubts God. He goes through into the temple of the Lord and he strips the temple of the gold. And then he goes into his palace and finds all the treasuries, all the silver in his palace, and he goes and he pays this man. Now I think, what I've noticed and realized, whenever I've actually taken the decision to follow God like wholeheartedly, each time the devil will come through with their mightiest attack. Like whenever I have made a decision, like this is what I'm doing, following God, I am renouncing something, I'm a very hard decision in my life, the enemy always comes through with the biggest of attacks. So I think even in this, the enemy is kind of like coming through with the big attack because Hezekiah had decided to devote his life to God. And here, this enemy comes through with a mighty attack. And this enemy had just destroyed Israel, the nation, which was far bigger than Judah. So Hezekiah is just looking at himself like, if he could destroy Israel, who am I? I'm just a speck of dust. He will destroy me at any time. So after giving him this ransom, the Assyrian king, who was ruthless, comes back. He still wants to destroy him anyway, even though he's now given of himself, because there's nothing else that he could have given. Like, besides his life, he's giving him all the treasures of Judah. But still, this king comes through. This reminds me, guys, of how ruthless and how moralless is the enemy. The enemy has no karma. Like, I've done too much to her. Okay, let's let her breathe. The enemy will take and take and take and take as much as he can take. Literally, we felt ourselves in situations where it rains and you feel like it just pours. Just one drop fell and 1,000 drops came through. Like, when we are at our weakest, that's where he pounces the most. He doesn't feel sorry for us. He doesn't stop and think of like, oh, she's gone through so much. Like, let me stop. He continuously takes and takes because at the end of the day, he wants to see you and I completely destroyed. I remember a few months ago, I think it was October, yeah, beginning of November, I did a video where I spoke about being a virgin. And I remember releasing that video and the fear I felt. Guys, I felt such a fear after I released that video. I had no idea why. I just felt some sort of a fear. Like, for a couple of nights, I didn't rest. Like, I couldn't sleep properly. I just kept on having dreams. I didn't understand them. They were just not great. But I was just so fearful. I'm someone who loves taking walks and whatnot. But those days, I just wanted to stay, like, put in one place. I was so fearful and I couldn't understand it. Then a few days later, I have this dream. Then I finally get to understand it. In this dream, I am assigned a bodyguard, like a bodyguard. But somehow I am so afraid of this bodyguard. This person is supposed to be protecting me from trouble, but I am afraid of the bodyguard as if this bodyguard is going to attack me. And when I woke up from the dream, I'm kind of like, God, a bodyguard that I am afraid of? Like, literally, what had happened in the dream, I wanted to be in a public place with this bodyguard because if I were in private, I knew that this bodyguard would attack me. Then, as God is kind of trying to interpret this for me, to me, it's like we have familiar spirits. Familiar spirits are what the enemy uses. The enemy is not omnipresent, so he's not at all places at one time like God is. What the enemy does, he's just organized. So he assigns familiar spirits or monitoring spirits to kind of see what is happening in Smar's life. What are her weaknesses? So these spirits know my weaknesses, know my strengths, know whatnot. They know what's happening in my life as in currently. And what they do is they want to exploit the weaknesses in my life. So if there's something that's happening in my life, they would do all in their power, everything in their power to kind of destroy that. So it's not like the enemy is there, the devil is there, but it's these spirits that kind of work to do these things. These are the same spirits that sangomas and nyangas and psychics consult when they're doing a reading on someone because they don't have the power to know what has happened in a person's life. So it's these spirits that feed them that information. So you kind of sit there with the psychic and you're like, wow, they know so much about me. This person must be powerful. But it's actually these spirits that feed them this information because these spirits are all around you. Like they keep in guard of you. So now the spirits, I had just released a video that's speaking about being a virgin. I'm promoting purity and whatnot, you know. And right after that, this spirit had just decided, you know, the best way you can attack this girl is by ensuring that she's not a virgin. How can we do that? She has no boyfriend and whatnot. She should be raped. So this bodyguard I kept on seeing in my dream was the spirit of rape. It was lurking around, waiting for someone that it could possess and use. So, you know, when I realized that morning, I was like, yeah, the devil hates me. Yo, the devil hates me. Like literally all day, every day, all he does is they think of how they can destroy us. Like he thinks of how he can destroy us. If you have a certain addiction, these spirits know that if you have a certain addiction, no one is going to come, it's not going to let someone come through to me and they kind of try and tempt me with alcohol. Like, me and alcohol are not, I really don't care. You can drink wine, whatever, in front of me, and I just won't even have an inkling. Like, it's something I really don't care about. But if someone is an alcoholic or recovering alcoholic, that's what they'll use. They'll use alcohol. So these spirits will know. So they kind of try and manipulate situations to ensure that I keep on falling into the same trap and to ensure that I never make it in certain areas in my life. So here this thing was like, you know what, to shut this girl up, we need to do this. She's not going to be speaking about virginity if she's raped. She's just going to be focusing on the trauma and whatnot. So to shut her up, this should happen in her life. So guys, the enemy hates us. Yo, he hates us. And we literally just have to hate him back. Okay. So this king, Hezekiah made this mistake. He gives this guy all the treasuries, and this guy comes back for him, and he's like, I'm gonna destroy you anyway. So there's nothing, we can never bargain with the world or with the enemy. No matter what you choose to give him, he's still going to want more. He's still going to want more. I don't care who you are, where you're from. If you're a Christian, you cannot be bargaining with the enemy. The more, like literally, you're gonna be addicted to marijuana. Now he's gonna say, let's try coke. Now let's try that. Now he's gonna keep pulling you into something. The enemy will always want more. If you give in to one thing, no, it will always lead to another thing. So he's not gonna be like, oh, we've taken so much from her, we should let her be. No, instead of like, what else can we take? So these familiar spirits will come back and like, oh, we've done this to her. What else can we do? You know, so the enemy is not in lack of us, guys. So we can never actually just bargain with the enemy. I don't care what's happening, but we can never bargain with the enemy. You know, every time I think of this story, I think of this young girl who's just in love with the Lord. Then all of a sudden, there's some guy who comes through. She gives off all her treasures, like thinking that I will receive love that is eternal. She's left with the baby, and the guy's gone. She gives up on love for a moment. Then a year or two later, she's like, oh, here's the guy of my dreams. He comes, he does something else that's even worse than the previous guy. So literally the enemy keeps taking and taking, and we build up this bitter thing in our hearts, where I'm just tired of the world. But it's the enemy that just keeps taking and taking and taking and taking. But what I love about Hezekiah is the fact that even though he had made a mistake and he saw that he had no way out, what he did was run to God. The biggest mistake, as I said at the beginning of the video, is that the enemy wants to put us in isolation, like place us there. And we sort of listen and stay there, not understanding that in isolation is where he will destroy us easily with no one helping us. So Hezekiah, when he's made the mistake and the enemy comes back to him, he runs to God. In chapter 19, verse 14, after receiving a letter from this king, he goes to the temple. The temple he stripped of God's treasury. The temple he stripped, he laid the letter there, and he's telling God, like, I don't have the strength to do this. I can't do this. But you are God who has power, who has all the might. So Lord, just see us through. And when we read, God comes through. He sends a response through the prophet Isaiah. And before long, the Assyrians are destroyed. They just woke up and they're in their camp. It says 185,000 soldiers in the Assyrian camp were dead. Just like that, through the night, no one knows, it was just God. And the king withdrew from Judah and never bothered them again. But this is something that God did, even though Hezekiah had made a mistake. So at the end of the day, bottom line, what I'm saying is that it doesn't matter what mistake you've made, what mistake I've made. There is nothing where there's no mistake that I can do where God is literally like, you know what, I'm just done with you. People can do that. I can be fed up with you and like, you know what, go drown. You know, I'm just tired of you. But God, you can't take the characteristics of humans and equate them to God. God never ever does that. God never does that. So he is going to keep chasing and chasing and chasing after you. So Hezekiah was able to go to God and say, you know what, Lord, I made a mistake. I am sorry. Forgive me. But here's my issue. And in exposing the matter, Hezekiah was able to be saved. And in return, the entire nation of Judah was able to be saved. So the moral of the story is it the moral of the story? The moral of the story, a word of encouragement today. It doesn't matter what you're going through. It doesn't matter what you've gone through. It doesn't matter what mistakes you've made. We serve a loving God who can still forgive time and time again. Just do not die in silence. Reach out to someone, speak to someone. I'm always available. DM, whatever, inbox, whatever you can do. But just speak to someone and have God lead you out of that. Because if you stay in that right, the enemy is just going to keep taking and taking and taking from your life. So you can never bargain with him. He will never have enough. But God is able to save. God is able to sustain us. God is able to protect us. God is able to deliver us. Even when we have put ourselves in that mess. God is so good. God is so great. You can blossom into the gorgeous daisy God created you to be.